Hi, everyone. Tough job. Last session. Any reasons, any guesses why I got the last session? It has nothing to do with the service provider status I have. It is just that I had 56 slides and they didn't get a slot in between. No, I'm just joking. So we'll just quickly start. I'm Rishi, Global Vice President at Concentrix. I manage cybersecurity and governance, risk, and compliance. Part of my job is to manage PCI DSS compliance for the enterprise. I represent one of the biggest service providers. We are a company of 440,000 people spread across the globe, and I have the privilege to serve some of you as a service provider in different countries. So thanks for your business. Why we are talking about service providers? I know that service providers are not talked about a lot in the PCI space, but the reason I'm talking about service providers are service providers see a lot of attacks from all over the place. Any reasons you see service providers being attacked? I know that some of you were hackers in your earlier life. Who would you hack? Would you hack a large brand who would have spent billions of dollars on security? Or you would hack a service provider who would give you an easy access to the brand? Right? That's the reason service providers are in the limelight right now. Who tracks the biggest breaches of 2025? Any guesses? They all originated from service providers because they are in the middle. What it results into? For a brand, it's a reputational damage, financial losses. We all know operational disturbance, penalties, increased scrutinies from the regulators, and whatnot. And service provider also loses a lot. If it is of a size and scale which matters, it can be an extinguishing event for the service provider, but more damaging for the brand. If you look at from a positive side, service providers are also the guardians of the cardholder data. We are the ones who are empowering PCI compliance. So we are in the middle, and some of the common myths, let me clarify, service providers, and I know merchants deal with this a lot. I am ISO 27001 compliant, I don't need PCI. I do not store cardholder data, I don't need PCI. I only process PCI data on client systems, I do not see PCI. That's not the case, right? We have to break those myths with our service providers. We are guardians, we can secure the payment system. One of the biggest touchpoint service providers like us we will have on cardholder data is call recordings, screen recordings, possibly logs if the applications are coded poorly, right? And we can be trusted partners, and service providers are at the core, right? And they are part of the chain. So if you look at PCI in totality, if any one of this gets breached, we have a biggest breach. Some of the complexities service providers go through, right? Obviously the same as technical complexity. When you are servicing multiple customers, you have the technical complexity of segmentations, network segmentation. How would you come up with a policy management? When you are a service provider, you are servicing multiple customers. Some may demand HIPAA, some may demand PCI, some may demand TISAX, SOC 2. How would you come up with a framework or a policy which says that if I make this change in the policy, I am compliant to most of the standards? Monitoring and maintenance, every standard has some bit of variations from a logging requirements. How do you deal with that? Is there a one-size-fits-all? Possibly the answer is no. So these are some of the technical challenges. Once you have cloud, how do you segment the cloud from a cardholder data perspective? Enforcement of security policies across, when you are a large organization, how can I give my customers a unified experience, whether they land up in Manila or India or US or Latin America? And then obviously, resource constraints. We all have open job recs for cybersecurity professionals. If anyone does not have, I would like to see a raise of hand, right? And the biggest is third-party and connected devices. We are in an ecosystem where everybody is connected. We are connected to our medical providers, we are connected to our merchants, we are connected to our customers, we are connected to so many third parties. How do you ensure that there's a compliance overall? Then if I don't talk about AI, the presentation is incomplete, so I'd rather talk about AI. Everybody is implementing or is in the journey of AI, and everybody in parallel is implementing governance on AI. Because we don't have time to implement governance, then AI, so it's adding fuel to the fire. Why AI is becoming it's such a big risk. So if I go back 3 years, the risk to the data was that somebody will get access to my identity or somebody's identity in my organization. He'll try to log on. He'll try to log on either a VPN or an Office 365 or a Google Suite. And then he will go to some folders, try to fetch data which is sensitive to the organization. This could have taken hours, and by the time the SOC would have got alerted, he would have remediated the problem. What happens now? If an identity gets compromised, and if we are using copilots, it just takes an English query, give me a data or financial projection of the company for 2026. And if it's not properly managed, boom. Within seconds, the data is gone. We've already seen cases AI being misfired. How many of you know that a Chevy was sold for $1? If you've not Googled it, you will see the Chevy was sold and they had to honor it because the bot misbehaved. We've already seen improper attack on silent extractor. People who give queries and pass on sensitive personal information, impromptu can be used to fetch that data by a third party. So we are already seeing those attacks. And we've already seen deepfakes, and we've already seen big incidents which have costed companies $25 million already. Let's talk about how to implement governance. First and foremost, leadership support. We cannot move without it. It's always top-down and bottoms-up. So we have to get leadership support, and I think as you implement AI, it is very important that you make your leadership aware of the AI risks. Define roles and responsibilities. This is very well even mandated by PCI DSS. This becomes a very critical aspect, who's doing what. Risk management. Risk management came up with PCI DSS standard, but people who are doing ISO have been doing it for years. But again, as we have listened to the keynotes, compliance is not equal to security. So don't live in this world that I'm compliant, I'm secured. If you do security properly, you may be compliant all the time. Third party, very, very critical. Third party, fourth party, fifth party, whatever, right? We may be a third party to someone, but I am not being asked, how do you manage your suppliers? So you may end up having a very mom and pop shop supplier. Is he decently invested in security? Or is he giving you excuses that I am ISO 27001, which means I'm PCI also? So I think very important area of interest. I have seen QSAs spending a lot of time on third-party vendor risk management, very critical of an area of interest. Continuous monitoring, any change in the standards, keep a watch. I think it's very important for all regulatory bodies, industry standards, because AI is changing at a rapidly pace. So we have to keep updating the standards. While we have talked about the problems with AI, I think we strongly feel the future battles will be AI versus AI. It will be humanly not possible for you to do SecOps or CyberOps without the use of AI. So the positive side of AI is that it is here to help. SecOps, I think we've already seen AI helping a lot. So we have big banks here. You must be throwing terabytes of data on your SOC. Do you know it's humanly possible to get anomaly out of it. I think it's all because of AI and ML that is there in place. Vulnerability management, we had a session in the morning. We are all talking about continuous vulnerability management now and remediations as well using playbooks. That is all powered by AI. Data protection, access control, we are already talking about on-demand access, okay? So on-demand access, who needs what? Behavior access. Rishi logs on from a Mac 9 to 6 from India most of the time and uses Safari as a browser. Suddenly, Rishi logs in from a Windows machine, from Bangkok, from a browser which is not known, maybe Opera. Does it needs a further analysis to look at an alert? We have seen that, and this is all, nothing is signature generated. This is all AI ML. In compliance monitoring, gone are the days when you requested SOC and say, I need this dashboard, and the SOC analyst tell you, I need 8 hours. It is all made on the fly because you had data in the data warehouse. Incident response, how many of you have heard 1-10-60 rule? 1 minute to detect, 10 minutes to investigate, 60 minutes to remediate. If you are not in this category, chances are we will see a breach soon. Why? Because the time the vulnerability gets disclosed and the time it gets exploited is getting shorter and shorter. How many of you know the zero-day exploits can be just found in 2 minutes on WormGPT? How many of you have even heard WormGPT? Don't even try this site, maybe blocked as per corporate policy, but there are 2,200 malicious GPTs available which can give you codes to hack. Last but not the least, not a shortest, shortest mean if done comprehensively, it will be the path to PCI DSS compliance. But one thought first, how many of you have heard data is gold? Any raise of hands? How many of you have heard data is oil? Okay. If one thing you can take away from my session, data is not gold, data is not oil, data is uranium. The less you have it, the better it is, and the more protected. You have to protect it to the core. It is sensitive, and we have to store it to the minimum. Gone are the days, let's hoard it. We may need this data 3 years after. We may need this data 4 years after. What you are actually doing is you are increasing your liabilities. Because if a compromise happens, and God forbids you never needed that data, but if that data is out, it's a problem. How many of you have heard a term called harvest now, decrypt later? Anybody? Harvest now, decrypt later is, even if the data is encrypted, you thought the data is out with the hackers, I don't need to report it to the regulator because I'm compliant, because it was encrypted. With quantum, the hackers are following a technique, get the data, and we will decrypt it later. Your personal information may still be valid. Your passwords may not, but your social security number may not change. Your date of birth may not change. Possibly your address may not change. And that information is still out with the hackers. Something to think about as quantum comes in, right? This is something I mapped it to the PCI requirements. Secure network and system hardening. I think very, very critical. We've already talked about this as a PCI requirement. Cardholder data protection. Just a change in mindset. While PCI talks about credit card data, let's look at it in totality. Sensitive personal information protection. You will be in a much better shape if you look at this in totality, so that you don't have to follow different standards. If you follow PCI well and just look at it data in totality for all sensitive personal information, you'll be better off meeting all compliant requirements. Access controls and authentication. We've already seen MFA. How many of you have heard or seen MFA being breached? It takes just 10 minutes to breach an MFA, right? What people will do is they'll create a site which looks like exactly yours. You will put in your MFA, they'll capture the MFA and replay it against your website. So look for a authentication solution which is more robust. Get rid of SMSs if you've not already. SMS is not a secure way of doing it because we've already seen that breached. Unique ID activity logs, easier said than done. Everybody will show a raise of hand. If I tell everybody in the organization has unique ID, everybody will say, yes. The left out parts are service accounts. What are you doing? Are they attributed to individuals? Are you following the standards for service accounts? Restrict physical cardholder data access. One breach recently, major card. While the company had all the controls, technical controls in place, it was breached because of lack of physical security. So physical security is being looked at very, very closely by QSs now. Monitoring, testing, and incident response. How many of you are still doing fire drills? Show of hands. How many of you are doing ransomware simulations? Ransomware simulations are more important than the fire drills. And large customers have started asking for it. Because if you don't know, if you don't simulate a ransomware, what will you do when the situation comes in? Who's doing what? Is the playbook ready? Do you have playbooks if one of your supplier gets compromised? Those are the questions that need to be answered. Security policies, training, and governance. Training is very, very important. As I said, roles and responsibilities should be clear. Who's doing what in case of a crisis as well. There are a lot of companies who are doing the simulations today, and they'll give you a mind map as an output, that what will go in the user's mind, and they will create a scenario that your CEO received a call that your website has been hacked. It is showing malicious content. What to do next? CEO is calling CISO. CISO will call who? Is your corporate communication informed? Who is informing the public? Who's doing the log analysis? All that is very, very critical. And continuous compliance and improvement, right? It cannot be static. You are compliant now. You may not be compliant 5 minutes later if your device stops throwing logs. And as I said, compliance is never equal to security. Most of the breaches which have happened, the organizations were compliant to all the standards. So I think I want to leave with this thought with you, and I'm around if there are any questions. Thank you so much.